The first receipt was folded so many times the paper felt soft, almost like cloth. It was tucked beneath the velvet lining of my husband's locked desk drawer, the one he had always told me held nothing but insurance papers and old tax records. I remember standing there with the little brass key in my hand, my coffee going cold on the edge of the desk, staring at the words printed across the top. Property tax payment. Not for our home. Not for any address I recognized. For a white house on Brier Hollow Road, 46 miles away, paid in full every year for 9 years. The owner's name listed beneath the address was not mine. It was not even exactly my husband's. It was a trust, and the trustee was my husband's older brother, Martin. I read the receipt 3 times before my knees finally touched the chair behind me. My husband, Daniel, had been dead for 7 months. I had folded his shirts, cancelled his phone plan, sorted his medicine cabinet, and donated his work boots to a church drive. I thought grief had already gone through every drawer in our life, but grief had missed this one. Under that first receipt were more: utility bills, repair invoices, a handwritten note from a locksmith, a bank envelope with no return address. And at the very bottom, a photograph of a house I had never seen before, with blue shutters, an overgrown rose hedge, and one upstairs window covered from the inside with brown paper. On the back of the photo, in Daniel's handwriting, were 6 words: "If anything happens, ask Evelyn." I did not know anyone named Evelyn. That was the moment I understood my marriage had contained a locked room I had never been invited to enter. Good day, dear listeners. It's Mia again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please subscribe to my channel and like this video. And also let me know in the comments which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Claire Whitmore. I am 52 years old, and for 26 years I taught 8th grade history in a public school outside Columbus, Ohio. Teaching history changes the way you look at life. You learn that nothing terrible happens all at once. Revolutions begin with small taxes. Wars begin with ignored letters. Betrayal begins with one sentence you choose not to question, because dinner is on the stove and tomorrow is a work day. Daniel and I were not rich. We were steady. There is a difference. We had a brick ranch house with a sloped driveway, 2 maple trees in the front yard, and a kitchen table we bought the year after we married. He ran a small insurance office with his brother Martin. I taught, graded papers at night, baked banana bread on Sundays, and kept a garden that never looked as good as the pictures in magazines, but always gave me tomatoes by July. Daniel was quiet in a way I used to admire. He did not raise his voice. He remembered oil changes, birthdays, and where I left my glasses. He had a habit of resting his hand on my shoulder when passing behind my chair, like a small apology for interrupting my space. When he died suddenly of a stroke at 61, I felt the world narrow to the sound of the refrigerator humming and the porch light clicking on at dusk. People say the house feels empty after a spouse dies. Mine did not feel empty at first. It felt crowded with him, his mug near the sink, his winter coat on the hook, his handwriting on grocery lists, his shaving cream in the cabinet. I moved through rooms carefully, as if grief were a sleeping child I did not want to wake. Martin came often during those first weeks. He brought casseroles, handled calls from Daniel's clients, and told me he would help with paperwork. Martin was everything Daniel was not on the surface: polished, confident, a man who wore cologne to the grocery store and used people's first names too quickly. He had silver hair, perfect teeth, and a voice that made every instruction sound like concern. "Claire," he said one afternoon, sitting across from me at my kitchen table with a folder open between us, "you don't need to bury yourself in details. Let me carry some of this." Daniel would want that. I wanted to believe him. Grief makes you grateful for anyone who seems to know where the forms go. He helped me file the life insurance claim. He gave me copies of Daniel's business documents, or what he said were copies. He explained that Daniel had carried debts from the insurance office expansion and that some accounts would need to be settled carefully. None of it sounded alarming. Daniel had always handled the business side of our life. I handled the classroom, the home calendar, the holiday cards, the small moral weather of our family. We did not have children. For years that fact sat between us like a quiet chair at the table. We had tried. We had cried. We had stopped discussing it, because some griefs become more painful when you keep naming them. My students became the children I poured my lessons into, and Daniel never made me feel less loved, because motherhood did not happen for me. At least, that is what I believed. After his death, Martin began mentioning money more often. Not in a crude way. Never that. Martin was too disciplined for crude. He would say things like, "Cash flow may be tight for a little while," or, "There are some obligations Daniel shielded you from," or, "We should be careful before making emotional decisions." I noticed he said "we" whenever he meant "you." The first warning sign came in the mail 3 months after the funeral. It was a plain white envelope addressed to Daniel. I almost tossed it into the basket I used for final notices and memorial newsletters, but something about the return address stopped me. It came from a county recorder's office I did not recognize. Inside was a notice about a document request. Someone had pulled records connected to a property on Brier Hollow Road. I stared at the address for a long time. It meant nothing to me. When I called Martin, he paused for half a second too long. "Probably some old client file," he said. "Daniel kept records on properties he insured. Why would the county send it to our house?" "Because Daniel's name was on half the paperwork at the office." Don't worry yourself over it. A teacher learns to hear the difference between an answer and a redirection. Students do it all the time. Ask who copied the homework, and they tell you their printer broke. Ask why they missed class, and they tell you their grandmother likes soup. Martin had just told me soup. Still, I said nothing. The second warning sign was the bank statement. Daniel and I had kept one joint checking account, one savings account, and our retirement accounts. Simple, boring, the way I liked it. But in December, when I went through the year-end files to prepare for taxes, I found a transfer record from 5 years earlier. $8,000 had left our savings account and gone to a title company. I did not remember signing anything. I checked the surrounding months. There were smaller transfers too, $1,200, $400, $2,000, not every month, not enough to empty us, but enough to create a pattern if you were the kind of woman who taught students how to identify patterns in primary sources. I called the bank. The young representative on the phone was polite but limited. She told me the transfers were old and that some records would require a formal request. Were they authorized by both account holders? I asked. There was a pause, keyboard clicking, then her voice lowered slightly. "Mrs. Whitmore, for that level of detail, you may want to speak with a branch manager." The branch manager was unavailable that day. The next morning, Martin appeared at my door before 9, with a paper bag of blueberry muffins. "I heard you called the bank," he said. I had not told him. That was when fear first entered the room. It did not arrive dramatically. No thunder, no broken glass, just Martin standing under my porch light in his wool overcoat, holding muffins I had not asked for, knowing something he should not have known. "I'm organizing tax documents," I said. "Of course," he smiled. "But Claire, be careful. Banks can confuse widows. They use language that makes ordinary things sound suspicious." "Do they?" His smile thinned. "Daniel protected you from stress for a reason." I remember looking at him then, really looking, not at the handsome brother-in-law who handled things, but at the man beneath the polish. His eyes were calm, but not kind. His concern felt measured, like a dose. After he left, I put the muffins in the trash. I did not know it yet, but that was the first decision that saved me. Not because of the muffins, because it was the first time I allowed myself to distrust someone who sounded helpful. For the next few weeks, I moved slowly. I did not accuse. I did not ask Martin more questions. I went to school, taught Reconstruction and westward expansion, reminded children to cite their sources, and came home to read Daniel's old files like they were a textbook written in invisible ink. The locked drawer was in Daniel's desk in the spare room. I had avoided it because his desk still smelled faintly of cedar and aftershave. The drawer had a small brass lock, and I had assumed the key was lost. Then one Saturday in January, while cleaning the hall closet, I found Daniel's old fishing tackle box. Inside, beneath hooks and a faded license, was an envelope labeled "Spare Keys." There were 7 keys inside: house, shed, office, mailbox. One I did not recognize. One tiny brass key. I stood there with it in my palm, feeling foolish for being afraid of furniture. The drawer opened with a soft click. Inside were normal things at first. A passport, insurance papers, an old watch battery. Then I noticed the lining was raised at one corner. My hands were steady when I lifted it, but my mouth had gone dry. That was where I found the receipts. Brier Hollow Road. A house I did not know we owned. A trust I had never heard of. Martin listed as trustee. Daniel's handwriting on the photograph. If anything happens, ask Evelyn. I sat in that room until the winter light turned grey. The house in the photo seemed ordinary at first glance, but the longer I looked, the more unsettling it became. The upstairs window covered in brown paper, the weeds around the porch, the fresh lock on the front door. Someone had maintained the property enough to pay taxes and utilities, but not enough to make it look lived in. Why would Daniel hide a house from me? Why would Martin control it? And who was Evelyn? That night, I did not sleep in our bedroom. I slept on the couch with the desk drawer contents in a canvas tote beside me, and a dining chair pushed against the front door, which was silly because the door had a deadbolt. But fear is strange. It does not always make you small. Sometimes it makes you practical in ways you would have laughed at before. At 3 a.m, I made tea and spread everything across the kitchen table. Receipts, bank envelopes, the photo, utility bills, a locksmith note, 2 property tax confirmations, a carbon copy of a cashier's check. I arranged them by date because that is what I taught my students to do with evidence. Build a timeline. Do not begin with conclusions, begin with facts. The earliest document was 11 years old. A cashier's check from our joint savings account to a title company. The memo line listed only initials, BHR, Brier Hollow Road. The next document showed a transfer from a trust account to a contractor. Repairs, roof, plumbing, electrical. Then another, property taxes. Then another, security system. The name of the trust appeared several times. The Whitmore Family Preservation Trust. I had never heard those words in my life. Around dawn, I opened my laptop and searched the county property records. The website was old and unfriendly. I typed in the Brier Hollow address. Owner, Whitmore Family Preservation Trust. Trustee mailing address, Martin's office. Previous owner, Evelyn Rose Mercer. My heart changed rhythm. Evelyn. The woman Daniel told me to ask. I searched her name. Several results came up. Most were unrelated, but one was an obituary from 6 years earlier. Evelyn Rose Mercer, age 84, former piano teacher, beloved aunt, no children, survived by niece Patricia Lyle. Evelyn was dead. I read the obituary twice, then clicked away, because the sadness of strangers is still sadness. By 7, I had made a list on a yellow legal pad. Find trust documents. Contact bank manager. Locate Evelyn's niece. Consult lawyer. Do not tell Martin. I underlined the last one twice. There is a discipline to not reacting. I had spent decades in classrooms where children tested boundaries by watching your face. If you widened your eyes, they knew they had power. If you snapped, they knew they had found the door. The skill of staying calm is not weakness, it is strategy. On Monday morning, I called an attorney named Miriam Alvarez. She had helped one of my colleagues through a probate issue years earlier and had a reputation for being blunt in a way that felt like shelter. Her office was above a bakery downtown. The waiting room smelled like cinnamon and printer toner. Miriam was in her late 60s, with cropped grey hair, red reading glasses, and the kind of stillness that made you want to tell the truth quickly. I placed the documents on her desk. She did not interrupt me once. When I finished, she put on her glasses and read the receipts, the photo, the bank transfer copy, and the property record printout. Her expression changed only slightly, but I saw it, a tightening around the mouth. "Claire," she said, "I need you to answer carefully. Did you ever sign trust documents?" "No." "Did Daniel ever mention creating a trust?" "No." "Did you and Daniel have a prenuptial agreement?" "No." "Did Martin have access to your financial accounts?" "Not that I knew." She looked at the receipt again. "Not that you knew is going to matter." I felt cold, though the office was warm. "What does that mean?" "It means we don't guess, we request. we preserve, we document, and you do not speak with Martin about this without me present." Hearing someone else say it made the room feel both safer and more dangerous. Miriam made copies of everything. Then she gave me instructions as if assigning homework. Change email passwords, freeze credit, request full bank records, photograph the locked drawer. Do not remove anything else from Daniel's office without documenting where it came from. Keep a written log of every contact from Martin. If he called, let it go to voicemail. If he came by, do not invite him in. "Am I in danger?" I asked. She paused. "You may be under pressure soon," she said. "Pressure is not always physical. Sometimes it is legal, sometimes financial, sometimes emotional. But yes, you need to behave as though someone does not want you asking questions." That sentence followed me home. For the next 10 days, my life split in two. In the mornings, I stood in front of my students and taught them about the importance of documents. At night, I became my own lesson. I requested records from the bank. I pulled county documents. I searched archive deeds. I made copies at the library because I did not trust my home printer. I bought a small fireproof box and kept it under the guest bed. Each step was ordinary. Each step made my hands tremble less. The first real proof came from the title company. Miriam requested the closing file for the Brier Hollow property. At first they claimed it was archived and would take weeks. Miriam sent another letter, firmer this time. 3 days later, a PDF arrived in her secure portal. She called me into her office to review it. The file showed that the house had been purchased 11 years earlier for $182,000. The buyer was the Whitmore Family Preservation Trust. The funding came from 3 sources: a cashier's check from our joint savings, a loan secured by Daniel, and a private contribution from Evelyn Mercer. But the signature page stopped me breathing. There was my name, Claire Elaine Whitmore, signed as beneficiary acknowledgement. Only I had never signed it. I knew my own handwriting the way a teacher knows a student's. Mine leaned slightly left. This signature leaned right. Mine had a loop in the C. This one did not. It was close enough to fool someone who did not know me, but it was not mine. Miriam placed a hand flat on the page. "Do not touch the original if we get it," she said softly. "Why?" "Because this is no longer just hidden property. This may be forgery." The word sat between us like smoke. Forgery. I thought of Daniel, his hands, his quiet voice, his shoulder touch. Had he forged my name? Had Martin? Had they both? Love does not disappear when suspicion arrives. That is one of the cruelest parts. I could be angry at Daniel and still miss him so badly that I reached for my phone to call him. Miriam requested the notary record. That was when Martin called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was gentle. "Claire, I'm concerned about the tone of some inquiries being made. You may not realize this, but old business structures can be complicated. I'd hate for you to damage Daniel's reputation by misunderstanding things. Call me." I sent the voicemail to Miriam. The next day he texted, "We need to talk as family." I did not answer. Then my cousin Linda called. Linda never called unless someone was sick or selling raffle tickets. "Claire," she said, "Martin says you're trying to dig up trouble with Daniel's estate. Is that true?" I closed my eyes. What exactly did he say? He said grief can make people paranoid. There it was, the first public thread being pulled. Not accusation, concern, a calm man using my sorrow as evidence against my judgment. I thanked Linda for calling and wrote it in my log. January 24. Linda called. "Martin told family, I am paranoid from grief." Miriam read the entry and nodded. "Good," she said. "He's establishing a narrative, we establish a record." A week later, the bank records arrived. I sat in Miriam's conference room while a forensic accountant named Mr. Bell went through them with a ruler and a yellow highlighter. He was a thin man with careful fingers and a voice like dry paper. Numbers seemed to soothe him. "This is structured," he said after 20 minutes. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means the transfers were kept below thresholds likely to trigger internal review. Not always, but often enough to show awareness." He turned a page. "Here, here, and here. Funds moved from your joint account to a business operating account, then to the trust. In several cases, the memo lines were altered later in the exported records. Altered by whom? We'll need metadata, but access appears to have come through the business office, Martin's office. The room went quiet. Mr. Bell continued, "There is another issue." Of course there was. By then I had learned that secrets have basements. He showed me a transfer from an account I did not recognize. It was in Daniel's name alone. The account received periodic deposits from something labeled Mercer Holdings Distribution. Evelyn Mercer again. Was she related to my husband? I asked. Miriam looked at me. That is what we need to find out. Finding Patricia Lyle, Evelyn's niece, took 2 days. She lived in Dayton and worked part-time at a library. When I called, I expected suspicion. Instead, the moment I said Daniel Whitmore's name, she went silent. Then she said, "I wondered when someone would call." My hand tightened around the phone. "Did you know my husband?" "I knew of him," she said. "Aunt Evelyn knew him. She trusted him at first." At first. Those 2 words opened another door. Patricia agreed to meet at Miriam's office. She arrived with a canvas bag full of folders and the wary posture of someone who had learned not to hope too quickly. She was in her 60s, with kind eyes and a tremor in one hand. Evelyn Mercer, she explained, had owned the Brier Hollow house for 40 years. She had no children and had taught piano lessons to half the town. Daniel had sold her insurance. Martin had later helped her with estate planning, though he was not an attorney. Aunt Evelyn wanted the house used for scholarships, Patricia said. Music scholarships for girls from ordinary families. She said the house could be sold after her death, and the money invested. But then documents changed. Martin told us she had created a private trust with your husband involved. We never got a clear answer. "Why didn't you challenge it?" I asked gently. Patricia looked down. Money, lawyers, exhaustion. My husband was ill. Martin sent letters implying we would be responsible for legal costs if we interfered. He was very polite. That made it worse. Miriam asked, "Do you have copies of those letters?" Patricia reached into her bag. "Yes," she said. "I kept everything." I almost cried when she said that, not because the evidence was helpful, though it was, because there is something sacred about a woman keeping papers everyone told her were useless. The letters were on Martin's business letterhead, calm, professional, threatening without ever raising their voice. They stated that Evelyn's intentions had been misunderstood, that the trust was properly executed, and that further inquiry could cause financial exposure. Miriam read them with a face like stone. "This is pressure," she said. Patricia then handed me one more thing, a copy of a letter from Evelyn to Daniel, written 12 years earlier. "Dear Mr. Whitmore, I appreciate your kindness regarding the policy review. Before I sign anything further, I would like your wife Claire to review the scholarship language. You said she is a teacher. A teacher will understand what I am trying to leave behind." I read that sentence until the words blurred. Evelyn had wanted me involved. Someone had made sure I never was. The point of no return came with the notary book. The title company had used an independent notary named Sharon Voss. Miriam tracked her down in Florida. Sharon was retired, widowed, and by some miracle, still had her old journals in storage, because she was too stubborn to throw away proof. The journal entry for the trust acknowledgement listed my name. Beside it was a driver's license number. Not mine. Miriam's investigator traced the number. It belonged to a woman named Clara Elaine Wilmore, who had died 8 years earlier. Claire Elaine Whitmore. Clara Elaine Wilmore. 1 letter off in the first name, 1 letter off in the last. A dead woman's identification had been used to notarize a document with my forged signature. I remember sitting in Miriam's office when she told me. The radiator hissed. Someone in the hallway laughed softly. Life outside the room continued in its rude, ordinary way. Miriam said, "Claire, this was planned." I nodded, but it felt like my body moved before my mind did. Planned. Not a mistake, not confusion, not Daniel forgetting to mention something. Planned. Was Daniel part of it? I asked. Miriam did not soften the answer. We don't know yet. That night, I opened Daniel's closet for the first time since the funeral. Not to smell his shirts or cry into his sweaters, though I had done both before. I opened it like an investigator. On the top shelf was a shoebox of old receipts, nothing unusual. Behind it, taped to the wall, was a flash drive. Daniel had hidden it badly, or maybe he had hidden it for someone who would know to look only after she had learned enough. I took it to Miriam without opening it. Her digital expert found scanned documents, emails, and one audio file. The documents showed drafts of the trust. Earlier versions named Evelyn's scholarship fund as the beneficiary. Later versions shifted control to Martin as trustee, with Daniel as co-manager. The final version included my forged acknowledgement, which supposedly confirmed that I understood I had no marital claim against the funds or property. The emails were worse. Daniel had questioned Martin. One message from Daniel read, "Claire never signed this. We need to unwind it." Martin replied, "Do not become sentimental because your wife teaches school children. Evelyn is gone. Patricia has no money to fight. The trust is legal if nobody invites confusion." Nobody invites confusion. I had to stand up and walk to the window. There it was. Daniel had known. He had questioned it, but he had not told me. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of guilt, maybe because he had benefited too long before his conscience woke up. Then we listened to the audio file. Daniel's voice filled the room, thin and strained. "Claire, if you're hearing this, I waited too long. I thought I could fix it quietly. Martin moved money through the business and used your name on a document. I told myself it was temporary. It wasn't. The Brier Hollow house should have funded Evelyn's scholarship trust. I was weak. I am sorry. There is a room upstairs with her original papers. Martin does not know I moved them back." The recording ended with a click. I did not sob. I wish I could say I did. Instead, I sat very still. The truth has a weight of its own. Sometimes it lands so heavily there is no room left for tears. Daniel had betrayed me. Daniel had also tried, too late, to leave a path back to the truth. Both things were real. 2 days later, Martin came to my house. I saw him through the front window, standing on my porch in a charcoal coat, holding his leather gloves in one hand. He looked like a man arriving to express condolences, not like a man whose careful construction had begun to crack. I did not open the door all the way. I kept the chain on. "Claire," he said, with sadness rehearsed into his eyes, "this has gone far enough." "What has?" He glanced toward the street. "May I come in?" "No." A faint surprise crossed his face. Not anger. Anger would have been honest. "I loved my brother," he said. "I know. And I have tried to protect you. I know that's what you say." His mouth tightened. "You're speaking with people who don't understand the family history. I'm speaking with my attorney. That woman is encouraging suspicion because suspicion creates billable hours." I said nothing. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Daniel made mistakes. If you drag this into court, those mistakes become public. His name, your marriage, everything. Is that what you want your students reading online?" There it was. Not money first. Shame. I felt my old classroom self rise in me, the part that could wait out a room full of restless children without raising her voice. "Martin," I said, "all communication goes through Miriam now." His eyes hardened for 1 second. Just one. Then the polite mask returned. "You may regret this." I already regret many things. I closed the door. My hands shook afterward, but not until after the lock turned. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote down every word I could remember. Then I emailed it to Miriam. The next phase moved faster. Miriam filed a civil complaint seeking an accounting of the trust, preservation of assets, and injunctive relief to prevent Martin from selling or transferring the Brier Hollow property. Patricia joined the action regarding Evelyn's intended charitable gift. The court ordered production of records. Martin's attorney responded with polished denial. He claimed Daniel had managed the trust. He claimed I had known enough. He claimed Evelyn changed her mind. He claimed Patricia was bitter. He claimed documents get misunderstood by emotional people. Emotional people. I had spent my life teaching children to distinguish evidence from opinion. Now I watched a grown man try to bury evidence under adjectives. Discovery changed everything. Bank metadata showed that several transfers had been initiated from Martin's office computer. The altered memo lines were connected to his assistant's login. The notary acknowledgement used the dead woman's license number. Emails showed Martin discussing signature obstacles with a document preparer who later claimed she had not understood what he meant. Then Miriam got permission for a supervised inspection of the Brier Hollow house. I went with her, Patricia, the investigator, and a locksmith. The house sat at the end of a narrow road lined with bare trees. In person, it looked smaller than in the photo, but sadder. The white paint had peeled. The rose hedge was wild and thorned. The porch sagged slightly on one side. Inside, the air smelled of dust, old wood, and closed rooms. We climbed the stairs to the room with brown paper over the window. It was locked. The locksmith opened it in less than a minute. Inside were boxes. Not treasure boxes. Not gold. Not cash stacked dramatically like in movies. Just bankers' boxes, labelled in Evelyn's careful handwriting. Scholarship correspondence. Original will drafts. Music student letters. Trust instructions. House appraisal. Daniel Whitmore. Patricia covered her mouth. One box contained letters from girls Evelyn had helped quietly over the years. Piano lessons paid. College application fees covered. Rent assistance during hard semesters. Evelyn had not been a wealthy woman in the flashy sense, but she had been deliberate. She had wanted her house to become a doorway for girls who reminded her of herself. In another folder was the original trust plan, prepared by an actual estate attorney, before Martin got involved. It named a scholarship foundation. It named Patricia as family monitor. It named Daniel only as insurance advisor, not trustee. At the bottom was a handwritten note. If Mr. Whitmore's wife Claire is willing, I would like her to help choose the first recipients. Teachers see promise before the world does. I had to sit on the floor. For the first time in the whole ordeal, I cried. Not for the money, not even for Daniel. I cried because a woman I had never met had trusted the idea of me more honestly than men who sat at my dinner table. The deposition took place in a glass-walled conference room downtown. Martin arrived in a navy suit with his attorney, carrying a folder he barely opened. He looked composed. Men like Martin trust rooms like that, rooms with polished tables, rooms where language can be used as furniture. I sat beside Miriam, hands folded, a legal pad in front of me. Martin answered the first question smoothly. Yes, he knew Evelyn. Yes, he assisted with administrative matters. No, he did not pressure Patricia. No, he did not recall specific transfers. No, he could not speak to Daniel's state of mind. Then Miriam began placing documents in front of him one by one. The forged acknowledgement. The notary entry. The dead woman's license record. The bank metadata. The email where he wrote, "The trust is legal if nobody invites confusion." For the first time, Martin's confidence thinned. "I don't recall the context," he said. Miriam did not raise her voice. "Did you write this email?" "It appears so." "Did you know Claire Whitmore had not signed the beneficiary acknowledgement?" "I relied on documents presented at the time." "Presented by whom?" "I don't recall." "Did you instruct anyone to use identification belonging to Clara Wilmore?" His attorney objected. Miriam rephrased. "Were you aware that the identification used to notarize Claire Whitmore's alleged signature belonged to a deceased woman?" Martin looked at the paper. "No." "Did you benefit financially from the trust?" "No." Miriam slid another document forward. Management fees, trustee fees, consulting payments, reimbursements. Over 9 years, Martin and entities connected to him had taken more than $600,000 from a trust built from Evelyn's house, Daniel's silence, and my forged name. Martin's face went pale around the mouth. "That was standard compensation," he said. "For what work?" He did not answer immediately. That silence was the first honest thing he had given us. The civil case did not go to a full trial. Most cases do not. Real justice often happens in conference rooms, in filings, in negotiated terms written so carefully they feel almost bloodless. But before settlement, the probate judge held a hearing on asset control, and I had to testify. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No dramatic gallery, no shouting, just wood benches, fluorescent lights, and the quiet shuffle of paper. Miriam asked me about my marriage, my finances, my signature, the drawer, the receipts, The discovery of the Brier Hollow house. Martin's attorney tried to suggest that I may have forgotten signing documents years earlier. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "is it possible your grief has affected your memory?" I looked at him, then at the judge. "I taught history for 26 years, I said. "Memory can be imperfect. That is why documents matter. The signature is not mine. The license number is not mine. The bank transfers were not disclosed to me. My grief did not create those facts." The courtroom went quiet. Miriam later told me that answer mattered. Not because it was emotional, but because it was not. The judge appointed an independent trustee. Martin was removed from control immediately. The financial records were referred to state investigators. The forged notary issue went to the district attorney. The settlement that followed restored the Brier Hollow property and remaining trust assets to Evelyn's intended scholarship purpose. Funds Martin had taken were partly recovered through asset liquidation and insurance claims. Patricia was given a formal oversight role. I was asked to serve on the scholarship board. Daniel's estate was more complicated. Because he had participated, even weakly, some assets were tied up. I did not fight to preserve an image of him. I allowed the record to be what it was. He had done wrong. He had also preserved evidence that helped correct it. That did not erase the wrong. It did not erase my love either. People want clean endings, villain punished, husband redeemed, widow rewarded. Life rarely grades that neatly. Martin eventually pleaded to financial crimes connected to the trust administration and document fraud. He avoided the longest possible sentence, but he lost his license, his business, most of his reputation, and the ability to control the story. For a man like Martin, that last loss may have hurt most. He sent one letter after the plea. Miriam read it first, then asked if I wanted to see it. I did. It was brief. "Claire, I hope someday you understand that I was trying to protect what Daniel built. That was all. No apology, no responsibility, just one final attempt to rename control as protection." I put the letter in a folder marked Martin and closed it. The Brier Hollow house was repaired, but not turned into anything grand. The scholarship board decided to sell it to a young family at a fair price and use the proceeds to fund Evelyn's music scholarships. Before the sale, Patricia and I spent one afternoon there together. We opened the windows. We swept the upstairs room. We cut back the rose hedge until sunlight reached the porch again. In the room that had been sealed, we found an old upright piano under a canvas cover. It was badly out of tune, but Patricia sat down and played the first few lines of a hymn Evelyn used to love. The notes wavered through the dusty house like something trying to remember itself. I stood by the window and listened. That was when I forgave the house. Not Daniel, not Martin, not all at once, but the house. It had not been the secret. It had been the container. People had used it badly, but Evelyn had meant it for good. A year later, the first Evelyn Mercer scholarship went to a 17-year-old girl named Alana, whose mother cleaned offices at night and whose music teacher said she had hands full of lightning. At the award ceremony, Alana played a piece on the piano that made Patricia cry openly and made me press my fingers against my palm to stay composed. When I handed her the certificate, she whispered, "I didn't think people like me got chances like this." I thought of Evelyn. I thought of the forged signature. I thought of the locked drawer. I thought of every girl who almost loses a future because someone polite in a suit decides she is too ordinary to matter. "Yes," I told Alana, "people like you do." As for me, I sold the brick ranch house 2 years after Daniel died. Not because I hated it, because every room had become a classroom where I was tired of learning the same lesson. I bought a smaller home with a yellow kitchen, a deep front porch, and enough yard for tomatoes. I still teach part-time now, helping new teachers with curriculum and classroom management. I travel once a year with Patricia. We are not glamorous travelers. We pack sandwiches, argue gently with GPS, and stop at historical markers other people drive past. On quiet evenings, I sit on my porch with tea and watch the light move across the garden. Peace is not loud. It does not announce itself with fireworks or expensive cars. Sometimes peace is just knowing every account has your name on it, because you chose it. Every key on your ring opens a door you understand. Every document in your drawer belongs to a life you are no longer afraid to examine. I have learned that betrayal does not always arrive as cruelty. Sometimes it arrives as help. Sometimes it wears a good suit and brings muffins. Sometimes it tells you not to worry, not because you are safe, but because your questions are dangerous. I have also learned that careful women are powerful women. We are taught to think strength looks like shouting, but sometimes strength is making copies. Sometimes it is saving voicemails. Sometimes it is sitting across from a lawyer with shaking hands and telling the story in the right order. I was not brave, I was careful. And careful was enough. Money was never the real inheritance. The real inheritance was the truth Evelyn tried to leave behind. It was the reminder that ordinary women are not foolish because they trust. They are not weak because they grieve. They are not greedy because they ask what happened to what was hidden from them. If you take one thing from my story, let it be this. When something feels wrong, do not rush to explode. Do not hand your enemy your emotion before you have gathered your evidence. Breathe. Write it down. Ask questions. Find someone honest who knows the law. The truth has a weight of its own, but you may have to carry it carefully before anyone else can see it. And now I want to ask you, dear listeners, what would you have done if you opened a locked drawer and found proof of a whole house your husband had hidden from you? Would you confront the family immediately, or would you stay quiet and gather evidence first? Tell me in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that calm is not weakness. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, please subscribe and stay with me. Some doors are locked for a reason, but sometimes the key finds the right woman anyway.